Hello, and thank you for watching this clip of the Sports Detective Show. If you are unfamiliar with my content and this is your first time watching a video of mine, my name is James Williams. I've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. We are entering our fourth year, and I am finally just starting to put these videos on YouTube. So if you like this content, if you like this page here, please hit subscribe. Please hit like. I do a lot of monologues, things like this, reacting to stuff. I've also done over 50 plus interviews talking with people about college football, NFL, college basketball, NBA, all over the country. So hit subscribe if you want more content like that. Now let's get into the meat of this discussion here. And this is a thing that happened last week. I believe it was last Thursday on Twitter. Kirk Herbstreit basically gets super triggered by this Florida State fan here. So let's go to the original post here. Here's what Kirk Herbstreit's tweeting. He said he's headed to Vegas. First time for the Pac-12 championship game a couple weeks ago, and now he's going to do the Chargers-Raiders game. That was an absolute bloodbath, by the way. That must have been a tough game. And he a thing about Kirk Herbstreit here too. He if you didn't know this, which I didn't really know this until I heard an interview with him, he takes his dog everywhere for all of the games that he does. So his dog's like he has a person that's like with him 24/7 that's like taking care of the dog for him. So he posts a lot of stuff online about his dog, and that's what this Florida State fan here responds to him and says, his dog's named Ben, by the way. He's like, "Love Ben. Remind me again why you had Bama in and Florida State out on 11-14 and 11-18 before Jordan Travis was hurt. Why did you continue to push the narrative for the next 3 weeks? I haven't heard that explanation yet." Now, that's just a random comment. I'm sure Kirk Herbstreit gets stuff all the time. He is one of the most recognizable faces in sports, and especially probably the number one face in college football. And Kirk Herbstreit, if you go to his Twitter page, this isn't normally something he does, but he quote tweets this. And this is what he had to say. "Because Alabama is better, period. So is Texas, so is Michigan, so is Washington, so is Oregon, so is Georgia." Also, I'll apologize here. I'm not necessarily the best reader out loud, so if I kind of stumble here with some of this stuff, I apologize. I watch 10 to 15 games a week, live from September to early December. I think I'm allowed to give an opinion on who I think is better. If FSU doesn't like it, he has a little bit of a typo here. This is what's kind of interesting too about this too. Kirk Herbstreit doesn't typically like really, he's not like a guy that's always trying to like own people on stuff. In any way, he's more kind of like political with kind of his commentary on a lot of things. Like he's not necessarily a person that like he takes the fandom out of it. Like for the first however many years watching him, I really never even knew he went to Ohio State. And another thing too about college football, in college basketball too, to a degree, the fans are just psychotic and they're lunatic here, and Kirk Herbstreit is going to mention this here in a second. So like the fact that like you are able to like hold it back a little bit, even during the Michigan sign stealing stuff, Desmond Howard, who played for Michigan, was very much out front and center and like defending the program as much as he possibly could. So we'll continue here with like Kirk Herbstreit. Where were we? Yeah, if FSU doesn't like it, it is the best for. Tell the conference commissioners to change protocol to most deserving. Okay, a little bit about this before I go forward here. Again, I've talked to somebody that covers one of the Power 5 teams from, like, I've spoken to someone that covers like each team in each conference, like at least 90% of the teams. So I have a very good like kind of understanding, and I hear a lot of theories about this stuff. And there's a lot of people when they have their theory about like, oh, this is how I should do the playoff. You hear like 100, and people want to like, sometimes there's people that want to tear it down and burn it up. There's other people that are like, no, 16 teams. I always thought when we went from the BCS system, I thought the 14 playoff originally was idiotic, because you had a system at the time that was like, we have this BCS system and we're kind of prioritizing these 6 conferences. And the debate is like, hey, each one of these conferences, they're all equal members. They should all have a piece of the national championship. So what was their solution? To have 6 conferences, 6 different members, try and get a piece of this one national championship. We're going to have a 14 playoff. where again the Big East disappeared after that, so it turned into a Power Five, and it was like, oh well, five partners for 4 playoff spots. And you have Notre Dame in this too. Football fan, you say that plain, easy, simple solution. They're like, no, we need to do this and this and this. And it's like, no, let's just do it plain and simple. Anyway, that's how I think of it. I just think plain and simple, logical. It's very easy to not screw that up. So we'll continue here. He kind of talks here about like Florida State. Apparently, there was a time when like maybe Miami was more deserving of them, and then the Noles got to play in the BCS championship game against Oklahoma. I'll kind of like skip over that a little bit here too. And he says, listen, man, I've always loved FSU going back to the 80s. Bobby Bowden, the unis, the swag, the consistency, something about that brand I always was attracted to. And what happened with the 5 to 6 teams having a shot at the playoff and the Noles being undefeated and left out sucks. But I have to give an opinion on who I think the best 4 teams are. I'm not the committee. I don't vote. I watch games. I analyze teams and I give my take. That's it. And if you think I have an agenda or a motive, I'm sorry. You feel that way, but it's wrong. I love the sport and care about it deeply and can't make everyone happy. I ask questions with the commissioners in the offseason to understand things clearly, watch games and give my opinion. If it's for your team, you love me. And if it's against your team, you hate me. I wish it were different. And hopefully next year with 12 teams, it will be. I'm a huge fan of Coach Norvell and his team and wish the Noles nothing but the best. Okay. So that's basically kind of a summary of what happened here. Again, Kirk Herbstreit, not typically a person that like just likes to respond to this was a nobody. This was a nobody. I think he had like 37 followers at the time of the tweet. And then basically since, if you looked at the analytics there, that one tweet had like 8 million views or 8 million impressions or whatever. So like since then that guy's like tripled or quadrupled his like follower amount. So I think he's like in the 300s or something now. But still, like Kirk Herbstreit probably has gotten like a few hundred, maybe a few thousand things like that. And he's never said anything like that. So this is very much out of character for Kirk Herbstreit. And in a way, I kind of have a theory. I'm going to give you kind of my theory as to why Kirk believes this stuff. And then I'm going to kind of give you like my theory on the playoff a little bit because I feel like I have to here. So I think Kirk Herbstreit is reacting this way because he's talking about his opinion and he's like, hey, I'm just giving my opinion or whatever. And I think Kirk Herbstreit feels like, and I think this is actually 100% true. I think he thinks that his opinion swayed the playoff committee because I did this whole breakdown of like which teams get left out of the playoff, where are the biggest snubs, what like has history told people. Now you can go through the history of college football and you can point out like 100 different examples of things like this. Teams getting snubbed out, teams not getting a chance. Like you can go through a history, and that's why we have like multiple claimed national titles in a lot of years. It's really kind of like a dumb history and like a dumb sport about how we decide who's the champion, because it's really dumb too because there's so many people that care about this. Like college football is the second biggest sport in the United States. It just is. It's bigger than the NBA. It just is. I mean, maybe you could say golf's bigger, but I think golf is a little bit more international. And it's just really dumb how we decide who the champion is every single year. And Kirk Herbstreit has been a face of college football for 2+ decades now. And he's been very consistent. Like he's been very consistent calling games, being on College Game Day. He is as much the institution of College Game Day as anyone else is. Maybe like right up there with Corso, but Corso is kind of like, a little bit older now. They only bring him out for certain points in College Game Day now. So Kirk Herbstreit's the most influential voice in college football. And when he went on the weekend before the conference championship games, he went on to one of the biggest sports podcasts in the world, Pardon My Take, and he did a whole long interview, and he was basically saying like, hey, if Alabama wins and Texas wins and Pac-12 champions obviously in, and Michigan's in, and Florida State still wins, I don't know how you like Florida State's left out is basically what he said. That was his opinion. And I think he feels like he very much swayed the committee. And now I want to kind of dismiss some stuff here because there's like the idea of some people here too when they talk about this stuff and they're like, it is a conspiracy by ESPN and Kirk Herbstreit's this plant and this bug that he had to go on and he had to campaign, and ESPN is behind this, the puppet master pulling all these strings trying to get Alabama in the playoff. Okay, first off, that's not true. That's not true. ESPN didn't decide who was going to be in the playoff. However, this is where I contradict myself a little bit. I do think there's a difference between like this is kind of how like not to compare ESPN to like a gang or a mafia boss here, but like I will. There is things that kind of can be done. And it's kind of like you can be swayed in opinion or you can be pushed in a direction without actually physically doing it. Right? Like there is like a you can provoke something with your words, and there probably were people with ESPN and people that very much care about ratings and stuff that probably were saying to people in the committee, probably were saying it to people in that are very much high ranking voices of college football that were saying like, geez, Alabama Michigan would be a pretty big rankings bonanza. It'd be a pretty big rankings bonanza. Texas in the playoff, that'd be pretty big. Be pretty big. And I think there is definitely some of that kind of stuff going on. Be like, hey, man, I'm not saying that, like, we should try and, have a campaign for Alabama out there to try and get them in the playoff. But, I mean, if we could get them in there, that'd be pretty dope because, like, we can have an awesome game with Alabama, Michigan, and, like, so I do think something like that happened where maybe the ball was pushed in that direction. But do I think there's this mass conspiracy to keep Florida State out? No, I don't. Because there wasn't. Now, with that being said, I will give my opinion on what the playoff committee should have done, or not even my opinion, but just kind of like my summary of everything. So if I were on the playoff committee, a little bit of background on myself too, for people that don't know, went to Iowa State, so Big 12 person. That's kind of where I lean. I think even more of a catastrophe, even bigger than this Florida State one, was when we had the most boring national championship game ever with LSU and Alabama, where they both played each other, and everyone during the season was like, "Oh my God, LSU Alabama, they played a 9-6 game." Oh, it was so amazing. We love the punters. It's like they literally had an Iowa game. They had an Iowa versus Minnesota game, but it was in SEC uniforms with NFL players. So everyone was like, yes, we love you, Nick Saban. I think that was when Oklahoma State got left out behind them. I think that was more egregious than this. With that being said, I would have put Florida State in just because, hey, ACC is a partner in this, and we understand that for college football to be great, we need all of these conferences to matter. And Florida State going undefeated, actually challenging themselves out of conference in a way, playing LSU, playing Florida, which they play Florida every year, which Florida wasn't that good this year, but still, they tried. They took care of business in their conference, beat everyone that was in front of them. ACC is a good partner. They're undefeated. They're an undefeated partner. We'll let our undefeated partner in. So I was absolutely shocked that they didn't. And if I were on the committee, I would have said, we can't do this. We can't set this precedent. With that being said, if there was maybe 10 more years of the playoff and this happened, would the committee have done it differently? Probably. They probably would have figured out a way to get Florida State in there. With that being said, saying that I think Florida State should have made it, that I would have put them in there. If you are talking about the criteria that the committee has to use to say who makes the playoff and who doesn't, the criteria does say best 4 teams. The criteria does say that we care about if key players are injured. So with that being said, the committee got to look at Florida State, play against Florida, play against Louisville in the ACC championship game, And that offense, without Jordan Travis, just wasn't as sharp. Now, they were playing a Florida team that is, I mean, they've got talent on their defense. I don't know if they necessarily have a good defense. I think they had stretches where they were solid this year. I think they had other stretches where they weren't. And then they had a Louisville defense, which was actually really good. And with Louisville, too, Florida State had their third string quarterback in, not Tate Rodemaker. So, with that being said, I actually think the committee did their job to the best of their ability based on the criteria that we have here. So I actually agree with Kirk Herbstreit's point on that. It's like, hey, it's the best four. With that being said, and this is where people come back at me and say this, it's like, well, how do we dictate what are the best four? You know, like last year, for example. I mean, you could have just made a statistical argument, an NFL draft argument, a Vegas betting odds argument that Alabama was better than TCU last year. Now I could come back at that argument and be like, well, Vegas also said they were better than Tennessee and I can't remember who else they lost to last year. Oh, they lost to LSU last year. They were favored in both of those games and they lost. So should we just have Vegas do that stuff? Because Vegas is wrong sometimes. They're wrong, actually a pretty big percentage of times. But on top of that, too, does that mean that, like, could Alabama go 9-3 and then still be favored over a 13-0 Florida State? Could they go 8-4 and still be? So at what point do, like, games matter? And when do we, like, and that's why, and people made this joke with the NFL recently. It was kind of an internet joke when Trevor Lawrence got hurt. And it looked like the Jaguars' division hopes have kind of like crestfallen a little bit the last few weeks, where it's not necessarily 100% home run that they're going to win their division. But when they got hurt, and if you kind of have been following the NFL, there's kind of a logjam of teams in the AFC of like who could potentially get those like 3 wild card spots. Like it's right now, it could be like one of 7 teams or 3 of 7 or 8 teams that could potentially get those spots. And when Trevor Lawrence got hurt, people were kind of joking online. It's like, oh, well, the College Football Playoff Committee is going to put in the Bills over the Jaguars because we just think they're better. And it's like, well, wait a second. Like, we need to have some sort of merit-based system. And again, getting back to my point earlier, talking about how we set up this system with a 14 playoff. And if you ever thought a 14 playoff was a good idea, I think you're an idiot. I think you're an idiot, or you didn't think about it deeply enough in how the whole system works. Because we shouldn't have this system where it's like, oh, we think that the Big Ten and the SEC are 100% better all the time. Because when we have that issue, that's why we have the money only flowing to those 2 conferences. That's why we have, if you look at the recruiting rankings, those schools just always tend to get the better players. And like that's our problem with the sport is we're moving to that direction where this is turning into more Major League Baseball where it's the haves and the have-nots, right? And I think that's where we just get into a very dangerous precedent here. So that's kind of my opinion on it. And with that being said, though, I am kind of looking forward to the playoff. like Michigan, Alabama should be an awesome game. Texas, Washington, that was a game that was actually a bowl game last year. Washington won. So a little bit of a rematch there. I think people think Texas might roll there. I think Washington is actually very much a threat to win that game too, by the way. The last little point I'll have on this is, and that is when it comes to like, hey, the committee hates us. People are always out to get us. Again, as I said earlier, I've talked to someone that covers a team, someone that's a fan of a team of nearly every Power 5. I've got like probably a handful of people that I haven't talked to still on my list. And even people that I haven't talked to, I've either tried to or I follow their Twitter feed. So I kind of know a little bit about how those fan bases operate. And when it comes to the everyone's out to get us, our conference doesn't want us to succeed, NCAA doesn't want us to succeed, ESPN has this conspiracy against us. I actually think things are a little bit more fair than people give them credit for. Because, again, it's like Seriously, if you go, for example, if you go and you talk to somebody in the Pac-12, if you go and talk to somebody in the Big 12, if you go and talk to somebody in the ACC, and did I say Big 10 yet? Big 10 and SEC. And you ask them, like, does your conference have the worst referees? Just ask them that. Just ask them that. You ever see someone, does your conference have the worst referees? You're going to get the same answer from all 5 people in all 5 conferences. And they're going to say, yes, the ACC refs are the worst. And it's like you hear all of them and you're like, the SEC, you guys seriously think you have the worst refs? You guys have the most money, the most power. You can pay for the best refs, and you guys think that you have the worst? And it's just kind of funny, like in other, I'll use the SEC here for this last little point here. If you look at the commentary just in the SEC, you have like maybe some of the smaller schools, like let's say a Mississippi State, where they say, oh, the SEC, they just want Alabama and Georgia and LSU, and they want to keep us down on the bottom, and they want to keep stepping on us, and they want us to keep being a doormat forever. Conversely, if you go to the Alabama people that are talking about their team, they're saying the exact opposite thing. They're saying, well, the SEC hates Alabama and they want Alabama out of here, and they want to elevate up these other brands and these other schools, and they want Alabama to start sucking. And it's like, probably neither of those things are true. Probably the Alabama person is probably more wrong, because the Alabama and Nick Saban as a television product is like that's the reason that they have really like it's basically, if you look at the conference levels of money and prestige, basically since Saban got to Alabama, that's where the SEC kind of like really took off over everyone else. So like probably they'd more want that. But my point is, you aren't unique. If you think that a referee screwed you out of a game, if you think a playoff committee screwed you out of a spot, you aren't the only one. You're probably not going to be the only one. This stuff's going to keep happening unless we really have defined merit in this sport. We have defined merit, defined set of expectations, and unfortunately for college football fans, and fortunately for kind of like the garbage discussion post of it, we are very, very much far away from that being a reality.